They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom. The overworld dimension can be a very scary and dangerous place, especially for Minecraft villagers who, as a general rule, are about as smart as a box of rocks, but with even less ability to defend themselves. Luckily, there are golems who are arguably slightly smarter and definitely more capable in terms of offense and defense. Unfortunately, golems are not invincible, and they're slow, even when they look like they're running like madmen with their hair on fire. That is, as if they had any hair. And it's been this way pretty much since the beginning, so it shouldn't be too surprising that the modding community took notice, and over the years they've offered a number of interesting solutions. I'm going to talk about one of those today. Specifically, I'm talking about Villager Recruits release 1.12.3 for Minecraft 1.20.1. Now, in a nutshell, this mod transforms Minecraft into a first-person real-time strategy game. You, the player, will find villagers who have taken up the life of a soldier for hire, and after hiring them and upgrading their equipment, you can have them protect stuff, or kill stuff, or, as is usually the case, both. That's pretty much it. Thank you for watching. But if you're watching this video, you probably already know that much, and you came to watch this video because you know the devil's in the details, and this mod has a lot of details, which gives it both functionality and flexibility. And quite frankly, it can be a little intimidating, which is why I'd been thinking about making this video for a long time, even before I was nudged by some of you to go ahead and take the plunge and reveal the good, the bad, and the ugly about Villager Recruits. Nation wrote the mod and continues to support it with updates and bug fixes. And this is the same mod author that wrote and supports the Small Ships mod. And these two mods integrate together quite nicely, so you might want to go back and watch my Small Ships video after this. I'll put a link to it in the episode notes. There are 6 kinds of recruits, including horseman recruits, nomad recruits, crossbow recruits, bowman recruits, shieldman recruits, and recruits. As you may expect, horseman recruits have something to do with horses. Specifically, they ride around on horses and they attack their foes from horseback. Typically, a new horseman will have a sword, a shield, and their own horse. Historically, an armored knight was the battle tank of their era, with over 1,000 kilograms of horse and man flesh encased by armor and adorned with all sorts of sharp, nasty, pointy bits. And they came hurtling toward their foes at over 50 kilometers per hour. So it took a special kind of brave, or a special kind of stupid, to stand in front of these guys and expect to live to tell the tale. In terms of Minecraft and this mod, I doubt that fear or the crushing momentum physics play into the mechanics of this unit, but the sword and the shield make this a powerful melee unit, and as long as the rider's mounted, it's a fast and mobile unit, which amplifies their usefulness. Now remove the mount and you still have a guy on foot with a sword and a shield, though at that point he's a very expensive guy on foot with a sword and a shield. Now, except for riding a horse, the Nomad unit is a completely different unit for a completely different role. Nomads will usually come with a bow and their horse, and that's about it, which may not sound as intimidating as a ton or more of armor-clad meteor flying toward your face, but these guys are modeled after the nomadic warriors of Genghis Khan, and those guys were lightly armed and lightly armored, but they were mounted on very fast and agile horses and had plenty of arrows, so unless you had a faster or more agile horse, or could shoot a bow further and faster than they could, they would pelt you with arrows and never get themselves within reach of your weapons, ranged or otherwise. It allowed them to create one of the physically largest empires before modern times. So in game terms, the bow gives them a ranged attack, and being on the horse gives them the ability to get from here to there in a hurry. And even if the bad guys knock out the horse, you still have a bowman. Like the horseman, these guys tend to be a little pricey. But for the warlord on a budget, and where speed's not a major concern, there are the recruits that rely on their own 2 legs to move around. Now this includes the bowmen and the crossbowmen. Bowmen carry bows, and crossbowmen carry, surprise, crossbows. And the only real difference between the two is the weapons that they're equipped with. However, in numbers and with a little strategy, they can be devastating, as proven in the Battle of Agincourt between England and France in 1415. As long as they have arrows and stay out of reach of the enemy's swords, these guys will prove to be well worth the price. And finally, there are the least specialized, but arguably the most useful units, the foot soldiers. In this case, the shieldmen and swordsmen, or perhaps more accurately, the shieldmen and the no-shieldmen. These guys can't move fast and they can't attack from a distance, but the shieldmen can turtle up like the ancient Romans did, and both unit types specialize in getting up into the enemy's face and separating it from the rest of their body. Now you can certainly stick to just one unit type, but I think you'll find that for best results, mix and match to make the best use of the abilities and equipment for each type. I'll get to that in a minute. Now you can't recruit somebody who isn't there, so the first step in recruiting is to find somebody to recruit. Though actually I think that's the second step. The first step is to gather a literal mountain of emeralds and then find somebody to recruit, and you'll see why in a minute. So there are 3 ways to find villager recruits. You either make them, sorta, or they literally find you, also sorta. The third way is that by default they spawn in villages instead of golems. So to quote unquote make them, you need to pay visits to certain local merchants, and it's not enough to just come in and shoot the breeze. You need to actually spend some cash, well, emeralds, so that the merchant can advance up to level 2. At level 2, the merchant will get some new trades, and if you're lucky, they will offer one of the villager recruit workstations that transform unemployed villagers into recruits that can be hired. If you're unlucky, then the merchant will have new level 2 trades, and none of them will be the workstations. And at that point, you need to find another merchant. Of course, if something incredibly unlucky and tragic were to happen to this particular merchant, such as an unexpected lava bath or a tragic fall from a great height, then of course a new merchant would arrive to take their place, and you could try trading with them to level 2 for another chance to get what you want in the trading window. Of course, the chances of something like that happening are astronomically low. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. However, if you should be lucky enough to have access to one of these recruiting workstations, go ahead and buy it and plop it down in a high traffic area in your village. The workstation will work very similarly to how regular villager workstations work. The villagers will key themselves to the workstation and gain the profession of recruit, with the particular flavor of recruit decided by the particular flavor of the workstation. Now, where this deviates from the traditional villager profession model is that once the villager has become a recruit, they are no longer part of the village population, and they are no longer tied to that workstation. So you can pick up the workstation and your recruit is still a recruit unless and until they come to an untimely end. Likewise, if you leave the workstation in place, it continues to do its job. So if you have, for example, 10 unemployed but otherwise employable villagers in your town, you could plop down this workstation, and in fairly short order you would have 10 recruits, and then you could pick up the workstation and let slip the dogs of war. However, this gets kind of messy when you're recruiting for mixed forces. In other words, let's go back to that example of a village with 10 unemployed villagers, and let's assume you want 5 bowmen and 5 shieldmen. So you plop down a bowman workstation and you plop down a shieldman workstation, and you wait for the magic to happen. Now you could see it work out so you get exactly 5 of each, but the odds are much higher that you'll get some type of lopsided random mix, like 6 of one and 4 of the other, or 7 of one and 3 of the other. So if you have compulsive tendencies, and who doesn't, and you want to be more deliberate in transforming your villagers, I suggest you plop down one workstation and transform the needed number, and then pick up that station and plop down the other until you transform the required number of the other type of recruit. And in case you were wondering, you get the workstations for recruits from the weaponsmith. Armor smiths provide the workstations for shieldmen. Not surprisingly, you will get the workstations for both bowmen and crossbowmen at your local Fletcher. Very surprisingly, you will find the workstation for your horsemen at the butcher, which raises a lot more questions than it answers. The workstation for the nomad is less worrisome, but no less puzzling. You can get that from a cartographer. Now, as I mentioned before, the second method of finding recruits is actually letting them find you. Occasionally, a group of mixed recruits will spawn near a player. These come in the form of a patrol or a caravan. Now, a patrol is usually a smaller set of recruits of different types, and they spawn near players and hang out. If ignored long enough, they wander off or despawn. If attacked, they attack back, and if hostile mobs happen to come nearby, the recruits will attack first. So just having these guys hanging around is worthwhile if your need is just village or base defense. Of course, they come and go on their schedule, so if you need a more permanent or consistent arrangement, you need to start spreading some of that emerald love. Caravans tend to be slightly larger groups, and there will be one or more civilian villagers and one or more donkeys with the recruits. Now, the donkeys have chests, and they're usually carrying multiple stacks of trade goods, including stone, chains, bread, or whatever. They don't usually carry super high value stuff, but the stuff they do carry is not complete junk either. But it doesn't matter, because the only way to find out what the donkeys are packing is to right click to open the donkey's inventory, and at that point you are technically stealing, or at least attempting to steal. And the caravan guards will not so politely tap you on the shoulder with their swords, and then it becomes a battle royale with all the recruits in the caravan versus you. And if you have troops of your own, well, it becomes a huge battle royale deluxe with cheese, and you are in the middle. Now, whether we're talking about patrols or caravans, there's usually a mix of different recruit types, and you can run up and recruit them just as you can with the ones created through the workstations. Just a note about caravans: if you kill all the recruits in the caravan, or hire all the recruits in the caravan, you are then free to take whatever the donkeys are carrying without all the bloody muss and fuss of a battle. Sometimes a caravan will check in and then check out, or move out, or whatever, leaving the civilian villagers and the donkeys behind. The villagers will move in like they own the place, and the donkeys will do their best to wander around and get in your way as often as best they can. But on the bright side, all the stuff they carry is yours for the taking. Again, without all that hostility and negative energy. Recruits created through workstations have the bare minimum equipment to do their job. Think mall security guard. Recruits that spawn in patrols or caravans are usually fairly well or very well equipped with armor and weapons, so think police or military. And as I said before, they're much more expensive too. But how exactly does the hiring work? Well, run up to the potential hireling and right click on them. You'll get a screen like this. The window at the top right includes the stats of the recruit, including level and general rating, and in the middle of the dialog box is a button to hire the recruit. It includes the price to hire. Depending on how you are fixed for emeralds, these prices may be anything from simply high to crazy high. A new recruit with no armor might be as low as 4 emeralds, while a new mounted recruit with all iron gear may require more than 50 emeralds. As you would expect, recruits with less experience, lesser quality gear, and lower morale are cheaper. Recruits with more of those things are more expensive, sometimes radically more expensive. Probably the biggest variable of new recruits is equipment. So as a general rule of thumb, unless you live like Scrooge McDuck and can wade in swimming pools filled with emeralds, you want to hire recruits with little to no equipment and then equip them yourself with the good stuff. Unless you have a mod that changes things, the avatars for players in the game are what they are, and they can do what they do. The players can beef them up offensively and defensively with gear, but experience is a currency that you use to enchant items, and that's pretty much the extent of it. However, the recruits have an actual experience in leveling mechanic, and it ties directly into their abilities. So a level 1 recruit is Steve Rogers before he took the Super Soldier Serum, and a recruit at the highest default level, which is 20, is much closer to Steve Rogers after he took the Super Soldier Serum and became him Captain America. Now recruits earn experience by killing stuff, and after earning 250 experience points they gain a level. Unlike for players though, this number is always the same regardless of the recruit's current level. So, you can lead the life of a petty warlord and send your green troops in to be ground into sausage as cannon fodder, or you can take care of your troops and nurture them so that they can learn and level up, and eventually you have your own squad of superheroes. I think the effort would eventually be worth it. Recruits have their own stuff. If they became recruits to a workstation, that ain't much. If they were spawned as part of a patrol, a caravan, or as a new village golem, their gear is probably substantially better. However, with the exception of most firearms, generally any armor or weapon that you can use, they can use. So, if you deck out a recruit with uber netherite kit that's fully enchanted, that recruit's going to be tough as nails even as a green novice, and very Avenger-like once they reach high level. Now once you've hired a recruit, you can use shift right click to open up their screen, and from here you can see the details of their stats, commands to give them, as well as what's in your inventory and what's in their inventory. So you can swap back and forth between the two inventories, and you can directly equip or unequip any item that they are wearing or carrying. This is the quickest and most effective way to beef up your forces. Now besides the weapons and the armor, you can also give your recruit food with which to heal and maintain themselves. Now in the mod, this is called upkeep. They can eat most foods. In fact, they'll eat any food that is designated as a food. With the default settings, they won't eat pufferfish, spider eyes, or poisonous potatoes, but they will eat everything else, including rotten flesh and modded foods that may be harmful. Now, you can alter this through the config file, but I suggest, as a general rule, you should treat them just like a toddler, and don't give them anything that you don't want them to ingest at some point. Recruits can also upgrade their kit on the fly. For example, you send your recruits into a zombie horde that's attacking a peaceful little village. One of the zombies happens to be wearing an enchanted golden helmet. Your troops sweep in, and after the blood and dust settles, your troops are victorious. Of course. However, if the helmeted zombie happened to drop that helmet upon death, that same helmet is almost certainly on the head of one of your troops. These guys are practical, so even if the equipment on the ground is from one of their own fallen comrades, clearly that guy's no longer using it, and if it's better than what the living recruit has, well, it'll best be put to use on one of the currently living recruits. Yeah, war's a pretty mercenary business, sometimes literally. Now from the same screen where you can access the recruit's inventory and see their stats, you'll also notice that there are buttons with which you can give that particular recruit orders. Now we'll get into what each of the different orders mean, but if you needed to call this up on each and every one of your recruits just before or during the heat of battle, chances are pretty good the battle will be over and probably lost, even before you're able to order a handful of recruits. However, your recruits can be divided or assigned into groups, and these commands can be given to all the recruits in a given group, all at once. By default, there are pre-existing groups based on role, and you can create your own. Any recruit that starts with a ranged weapon is automatically put in the ranged group, and that includes bowmen, crossbowmen, and nomads. Any remaining units that don't have a horse are put in the infantry group by default, and mounted recruits without bows, i.e. the horsemen, start out in the cavalry group. Now there's one more default group, which is the everyone group, which for some strange reason starts off with nobody in it. And since recruits can only be put into one group at a time, putting everyone into the everyone group will leave no one in the other groups. But all of that's important because pressing R will bring up the group command screen, and now you can give commands to an entire group at once. And this is where it truly starts to feel like a real-time strategy game. There are even buttons with which you can command a group to form up in a specific formation, and in the upper left corner of the screen you can toggle specific groups. So you can give a set of orders to only one group, or all the groups, or only some of the groups. You can change the group that a given recruit belongs to, but there's no quick or easy way to do that. You'll need to open up the stats screen of each individual you'll want to reassign, and for each you will need to manually select which group they should belong to. Each individual has their own screen, and besides their stats, inventory, and ability to reassign them to groups, there are a number of buttons that give orders to that individual, and only that individual. Likewise, on the group screen, there are buttons there to give orders to entire groups. Now, there's a lot of overlap between individual and group orders, and some orders are exclusive to only one context or the other. Also, there are 3 pages of group commands. Just choose the icon for the corresponding group of commands you want to look at, combat, movement, or other. Now, combat commands are for choosing targets, setting aggression level, and on-the-fly tactical orders. Movement commands are all about the movement and formations, and the other category is for commands that don't really fit into the first 2 categories. First up is the basic move command. Now, as you might expect, it tells your recruits to move from point A to point B. Now, point A is wherever they happen to be when you make the order, and point B is wherever your targeting crosshairs are at the time of the order. Now, that part works just hunky-dory. It works with individuals and with one group or more than one group at a time. Where it gets complicated is in the use of formations. The default selection is not to use a formation, and so your recruits just clump together at the destination like a bunch of high school kids socializing before school. If you select the given formation and give the order to move to a single group, they will form up at the destination in the selected formation, or a fair approximation of it. However, if you give the same move order with a formation to more than one group, there'll be trouble in River City. Now, each group will attempt to do their own version of the formation, but they're all trying to do the same thing in the exact same location, which ultimately results in the same before-school cluster I just mentioned. So, choosing formations in that case really results in no formation, or at least not one worth calling a formation. The forward command is pretty straightforward. Kinda. When you give the command, the recruits will move in the direction you are facing. They move about 10 blocks and halt. What is less straightforward is how they do this. If you have them moving as a high school cluster, then you still have a high school cluster at the end. But if they are already in a formation and you give the forward order of no formation selected, they will all move 10 blocks in the indicated direction, but otherwise mostly keep their formation as it already is, which means they may be formed in one direction but facing a totally different direction. If you give the forward command with the same formation selected, the recruits will move forward 10 blocks but pivot their formation to the new direction. If you give the forward command with a different formation selected, they will move forward but line up in the newly designated formation at the end of the movement. Now, backward is essentially the same as forward, with the important distinction that the recruits will move backwards 10 blocks. And an important consideration with that is that they turn and move instead of backing up, which means that at the end of the maneuver, they are facing the direction they moved, showing their back to their old position, which, militarily speaking, may not be what you wanted exactly. One of the commands you can give your groups, at least your ranged units, is the strategic fire command. Now, in warfare, sometimes it's necessary to prevent the bad guys from moving through a given location. Of course, you could build walls to block them or have a bunch of your guys standing there to fight them, but a tried and true method of keeping the bad guys at bay is the idea of strategic fire, which is to basically use your ranged units to rain death and destruction on the area you don't want the bad guys to move through. So unless they really want to pass through, they'll stay out of that area or get cut or poked to ribbons, either of which would work in your favor. Now, there's a related command called hold strategic fire, which does exactly what the label says. It halts the strategic fire so that your forces can then move through the area safely, or to let the bad guys into a crossfire situation or ambush, or you can choose this command because all the bad guys are dead, or maybe you have suddenly become a pacifist. Sometimes the recruits can be like toddlers or puppies. Once something has their attention, it's like the rest of the world doesn't exist, and they will stay focused on that target until they or the target are dead. However, that's dangerous, as they may not see that they are pursuing a foe into a bad situation. Now, you can get them to reset their focus by using the forget target command. All of the recruits in the group will reset their focus, and it'll be a lot easier to bring them back out of harm's way, or have all of them focus on a single target for concentrated firepower. Now, this works with both ranged and non-ranged units. The forget target command works only with groups. For individuals, you will find a clear target command that does the same thing. Different name, but same great functionality. Of course, if your recruit is running through the forest while chasing an enemy, it's kind of hard to get close enough to the recruit and activate the panel that lets you actually see the button, much less click on it. If you don't want your ranged units to fire until they see the whites of their enemy's eyes, or at least until you want them to, you can use the hold fire command, which will prevent them from using their ranged weapons regardless of circumstances. However, if you give them the fire at will command, they will fire on enemies that approach or those that fire on them. Shields up and shields down are commands that you might hear Captain Kirk give on the bridge of the Starship Enterprise, but they're also commands that you can give to your shield recruits. As you might have guessed, shields up will have your shield men hold up their shields to block blows, while shields down will have them lower their shields. You can use this to have your shield men set up a defensive line to hold back the bad guys while you have your ranged units fire over their heads at the bad guys. Or your cavalry units can move around into the rear to flank the bad guys and bounce them around like beach balls. When your shield recruits have their shields up, they move quite slowly and they can't eat anything to heal, so make sure that you let them bring their shields back down when you can, or you eventually might not have any shield men left to command. You can assign your recruits to bodyguard duty by moving the targeting mark on your screen over a given mob and then giving them the protect this order. Your recruits will then follow that mob around and protect it with all the zeal and enthusiasm as a Secret Service detail that protects the US President, but without the glasses and the earpiece radios. You can use the rest command to set an area aside where your recruits can go to rest up, preferably out of harm's way. Now, this is a useful command when used in conjunction with the upkeep command. Recruits need food just like you do. Obviously, if they're hurt, they need more food and sooner rather than later. Now, typically, you can give your recruits food directly and they can carry it with them and snack on something whenever they get hungry. But running around a large group of recruits passing out snacks like the flight crew on a long airline flight is not fun. So you could switch to a self-service model where you can plop down an inventory block, like a chest or a barrel, and then use the upkeep command with the container targeted to tell your recruits that if they're hungry, they can get something out of the designated container, and then they'll rush the container like a crowd of kids after somebody just split open a piñata. There are some caveats. They grab items from the first inventory slot in the top left and then work their way through the slots from left to right and top to bottom. Now, if they're hungry, they grab enough food to eliminate their hunger and then immediately gobble it down. If they're not hungry, then they will grab a handful of items and add them to their inventory for later. If you don't want the recruits to keep using the selected inventory item, you can use the clear upkeep command. If you want to go mobile and take your recruits with you, or you want to lead your troops directly into battle, use the follow me command. Just note that your recruits will follow you like a bunch of puppies will follow somebody carrying a dog treat, which is to say in a big messy knot. If they were in formation when you started out, they won't be in formation after that, and when you stop, they will stop with you, all around you, and even practically on top of you. If you've ever wanted to know what it was like to be a major rap star with a huge entourage and a security detail that is so tight that your fans can barely even catch a glimpse of you, this is your chance. You can also tell your recruits to hold their position, which is to say that wherever they happen to be when they get the command, that is where they will defend to the last man. Now, if you want to have them hold a different position, well, have them move to that position and give them the command again. You can also use the wander freely command to let your recruits stretch their legs a bit. Now, they won't wander too far away, but in another comparison to toddlers and puppies, they will wander too far away if they target something and then that same something leads them away from the area. Now, normally, mobs aren't sophisticated enough to do this, but enemy players are more than capable of this, so I'm just saying. If you set your recruits to wander, you can bring them back to wherever you last told them to be with the back to position command. However, they have to be wandering. If you give them successive move commands and then tell them to go back to the last held position, they'll just stand there, because technically they already are at their last held position. There are buttons to set how aggressive or passive recruit should be. Now, each setting has its own button. The passive button will prohibit your recruits from not only attacking, but even defending themselves. And the neutral button will allow your recruits to attack hostile mobs as well as defend themselves, but they will not attack enemy players or recruits unless attacked first. Now, it's important to note that in terms of who is or is not an enemy, anybody on another team is considered an enemy, and that distinction really comes into focus with the aggressive button, as your recruits will go out of their way to attack quote-unquote enemy players and recruits on sight. Now, the final button in that series is the raid button. It's not about killing bugs, at least not only bugs. When you click on the raid button, your recruits will kill everything that walks, flies, or swims except you and anyone else on your team. Now, it's not a very useful mode for making or maintaining friendships and potential allies. If for some reason you need or want your mounted recruits to no longer be mounted, such as trying to get them through a very narrow space where their horses won't fit, you can give them the command to dismount. Now, once you get them through, or when you realize that you paid a lot of extra emeralds for a mounted warrior and now you have a pedestrian warrior, you can tell them to return their mount and they will go back to the last assigned mount. Now, if you tell them simply to mount, they will hop onto the closest horse, donkey, mule, or vehicle. By default, this would all be the vanilla mounts and the ships from the small ships mod, but you can add other mounts and vehicles in the config. Also, your recruit needs to be fairly close to the mount or vehicle, otherwise you'll get a message that there isn't anything close enough. Now, just a note or tip, your foot soldiers have this command as well, and when you mount a bowman onto some random mount you had sitting around, they are, for all intents and purposes, a nomad. So you can save yourself a bunch of emeralds if you go into the horse whisperer business and then build a herd of horses and then gather your army and then mount your cheaper foot soldiers onto your stable of thoroughbreds. Using the team command really isn't about issuing a command at all. It's about opening up a special dialogue for viewing and creating teams. Now, teams are comprised of one or more players and all the recruits controlled by those players. So to create a team, you'll need a few items, including a banner. Any color a banner will do as long as it has some kind of design on it, because apparently blank banners will not cut the mustard. You will also need a name for the team, as well as a team color for the UI and a team color for the team's uniforms. The colors can be the same or different, but they can't already be claimed by another team. Now, in terms of the team uniform, it looks like just the sleeves and the leggings are colored with the team colors. Apparently everyone wears standard issue underwear. Oh yeah, I forgot the most important part. You will also need 10 emeralds. If you decide to disband the team, you can use the same dialogue. And if you want to join an already existing team, you can use the dialogue for that too. A note about disbanding the team, it simply removes the team and the team colors and all of that. The recruits will still be employed by their respective players. If you're on a team that includes other players, you can assign individual recruits to other players on your team with the assign to teammate command. Now, at that point, those individual recruits are no longer your problem, or even yours to control. Now, if you have a whole bunch of recruits that you want to pass to your teammate, you can use the assign group command. If you no longer want an individual recruit at all, you can use disband command, which is interesting, as a single individual can't really be banded by just themselves. However, if you happen to have a group of recruits that you want to give the sack, you can use a disband group, and that literally and grammatically disbands all of them. However, just a note, once you hire the recruit, they're yours until they die or you disband them. But if you disband them and then want them back, you need to rehire them. And if they're all tricked out in the best weapons and armor that you can make, they will be radically more expensive to rehire. Now, in addition, each time you disband a recruit and rehire them, their cost goes up by 6 emeralds. So even without giving them crazy tricked out gear, you need to be careful of what command buttons you push, as the cost of those mistakes starts going up rapidly. Once you get a recruit with enough levels under their belt, you'll notice that the promote button on the individual order screen will light up. Now, at this point, you can promote your recruit into a companion, and there are currently 3 different companions available, with many more on the way. You can promote recruits into messengers, commanders, and captains. Messengers are pretty straightforward. They will take messages and whatever's in their hands to a specified player, and then they will return. Commanders are a bit more complicated. By default, they are quote-unquote assigned the other recruits in their unit, but you can change that so the commander will act alone. You can give the commander orders to perform patrols using coordinates, and as a general rule of thumb, it's a good idea to have an upkeep chest at one or more of the patrol points because patrolling's hungry work. You can do exactly the same thing over water using the captain, except the captain can use the ships from the small ships mod, or else they will swim for it. They continue on these patrols until they're either dead or you tell them otherwise. Now, all things considered, there is some pretty amazing work here, including the pathfinding of individuals and units, especially when the land's relatively open and flat with few obstacles. However, it's still fragile, and when the ground becomes broken, constricted, or just plain crowded, unexpected and usually undesired things will happen. Now, this is especially true when you give orders to multiple large groups at the same time. So you'll want to order each group separately and move them adjacent to each other, but not on top of each other, because otherwise you will create your own homebrew mosh pit at the destination, and your recruits will not be particularly able to defend themselves or deploy if and when needed. Also, you'll want to remember that your recruit companions will spawn and load chunks as they go about their patrols. Now, you can turn this off in the config file, but then the chunks won't get loaded and your unit will not patrol. In fact, this mod has a massive number of important features that are completely configurable, and I've already mentioned a few of them. They'll be found in the server config file with the save game. For example, don't like paying emeralds for recruits? Think it's too expensive? Well, you can change that to bread, salmon, blocks of dirt, or pretty much anything else, vanilla or modded. Too cheap? Well, go ahead and change it to netherite ingots or even wither stars. Sure, you can do it, but I think at that point you'll find yourself to be an army of one. You can set whether ranged units need to be supplied arrows, and you can change starting equipment and whether they spawn in villages and pretty much every other aspect of the mod. So I strongly encourage you to go download the mod and try it for yourself. Now, if you like it, please reach out to the mod owner and let them know. It's always good for mod authors to hear that all their efforts are appreciated and enjoyed, and most importantly, used. It keeps them going, and of course that means more great mods to choose from in the future. So until next time, I hope this finds you and yours in good health, good spirits, and a touch of good fortune. Take care. Cheers.